Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to our talk on how we fired our butlers, drone CI at scale. So today, we want to share with you the experience we've had running drone in production as an internal service to Meltwater's engineers for over 2 years now. And hopefully, we'll encourage you to try drone if you've never used it. And if you're running drone right now, maybe we can show you some ideas and capabilities that you haven't seen before. So a little bit about us. My name is Jim Sheldon. I'm a principal software engineer with Meltwater. Have been with Meltwater for over 6 years now. I live in New Hampshire in the US. My wife and I have 3 children, and when I can, I enjoy boating, hiking, and skiing.
And I'm Brian Burnett. I'm a senior software engineer. Been with Meltwater for over 5 years. I'm a bit of a statistics junkie who likes to automate everything, and I enjoy also being outdoors with my wife and kids. I learned everything that I have about CI/CD from Jim, and Jim's going to be taking us through a little bit more about Meltwater and starting us off.
All right, so today we're going to share our experience with running drone in production as a production service for our engineers for a little over the past 2 years now. So a little bit about Meltwater. We deliver the leading integrated media and social intelligence solution for public relations, communications, and marketing departments. So at a high level, that's an idea of what Meltwater does. Some of the services that we provide are media monitoring, media outreach, social listening, social publish and engagement, and influencer management. We have over 30,000 clients around the world. Some of the big ones are here, you probably recognize. And if you're interested in learning more, you can check out meltwater.com. So Meltwater is a global software company that develops in a distributed fashion around the clock. Engineers, 300 engineers in 17 geographically diverse offices that we work with on any given day. So any solution that we provide to our engineers really has to spread well on its own. As you can imagine, communication is hard in such a large organization around the world. So we have to span all of these different offices and environments to be successful. So we have about 300 engineers in 17 offices. The whole company is about 2,000 employees and in about 55 offices in 25 countries. So we are part of what we call the foundation mission within Meltwater Engineering. So we enable, this is our mission statement, we enable teams to accelerate without thinking too much about the infrastructure, allowing a rapid path from ideation to prototype to providing business value. So here's an idea of some of the services that we run. We're 2 separate teams as part of the foundation mission, one in North America and one in Europe. We're North America on the left. We run things like managing AWS consolidated billing, best practices, Terraform, modules and example configuration. We run drone, which is the logo, looks kind of like a Pokeball. And we also run things like Grafana and Prometheus for metrics. So then our counterpart European team, they run a Kubernetes cluster. They're responsible for things like service mesh with Istio, and they even run an entire logging backend, Elk-based, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So services like these are what we provide to our internal customers, the engineers. So what we're going to talk about today is how we replaced multiple CI/CD services with drone, and we'll show you some features that we've added to our internal drone service. And with that slide, I will hand it off to Brian.
Thanks, Jim. So replacing a CI/CD service, first, I mean, we had lots of them. We had Travis, we had Circle, we had Jenkins, we had code build, code pipeline, you name it. We pretty much had tried it and or were using it inside the company. And like most companies that use Jenkins, I'm sure you can imagine we had lots of Jenkins is. So we kind of looked across our entire CI/CD solution footprint and came up with a list of requirements, if you will, some features that we wanted to make sure were there, and all of our engineers through customer discovery wanted to make sure were still present. So with that feature listing in place, we then took and had about 30 of those across the, I think it's 8 different products that we reviewed. Since we had Circle and Travis in use, we tried the enterprise products for both of those. Obviously, we wanted to compare it against our control, which was Jenkins, as well as some of the rest of the services that people had brought up or brought to our attention through the discovery meetings we had. Each environment was compared against the feature set and had a maximum of 5, which made it nice when it came to pulling out the winner, because it was kind of an unbiased opinion. It either had it or it didn't, or maybe we had to build something that added additional work to it, but that gave us our scoring. It was actually kind of difficult to finish all of the features at one point, because we were sitting there looking at drone, which was the clear winner, and still had more work to do. So fast forward on this to what we have. Right now in our environment, we have 1,466 repositories and run roughly 1,200 pipeline builds a day with 222 active users. But in reality, this is what we have now, but it didn't start that way. When we started this whole thing, we had all sorts of different services that are out there. What I've got on the screen are the top ones that were in use at that point in time, and we kind of followed those all the way through. Just a couple of weeks ago when we were preparing the presentation for this. I have a nice big star in the middle for when we upgraded drone from 0.8 code to version 1 code, which saw a pretty decent spike in usability and usage after that. But right now we have about 46% of the market share for CI/CD in our company, and we think that's pretty good. Our last Jenkins is collapsing as we speak, and there's about 3.9% remaining on that one. And after that, Circle and Travis are down to under 10% of our current list of repositories in the company. So that's all well and good, and we've done this growth, or had this growth, organically. We didn't want to force teams into using any particular service. We really wanted to provide the right toolkit for it, and if the right toolkit was present, you should see people shift. But one of the things we were most excited about is the fact that CI/CD was really taking hold. This graph really kind of shows a picture that tells, I think, more of the story of automating your repositories. And what you see here is we started out with 46% of our repositories that had absolutely no automation at all. Nothing. And since then, we've been able to take that number down to 25% of our repositories that don't have automation. That's quite the increase, and that's one of the things we're super proud of with the gains that we've had here. If you take into account that little bubble in the middle around January 2020, it wasn't really January. I think it ends up being like November, December timeframe, but the repos came over in January. There was it's about 700 imported repositories from another organization. And you can see on the other side of that an equal drop. So in reality, we had about a 30% increase in automation through CI/CD. So what's drone? We've talked about how we got there. We've talked about how we've replaced these services. We've talked about some of the growth that we've seen inside our company. Where does it come into play for you? Well, they really like open source. So it's free to use. Cloud.drone.io is a service that'll allow you to be able to go out and try any of your open source repositories. Just builds off of Docker containers you choose and or implement into your pipeline. And we'll get started now with some of the services that we replaced. And while we're covering each of these, we're going to try and show you the drone feature set that we employed to be able to cause those shifts. First up's Travis and Circle. And I tell you what, these guys are pretty good at what they do. And they really helped a lot of our teams as we were starting CI/CD back in 2016 and driving the organization towards DevOps to be able to automate a lot of the repositories that were there and create templates and recipes for people to utilize for that. Fast forward to spring of 2018 when we put drone in place, we had a bunch of teams that just started moving away. At that point, Travis and Circle both were having some growing pains. They had some downtime. They had repos that were causing problems, other build issues and agent issues. But apart from that, we were really curious why the teams were moving away. And it really wasn't even the downtime at all. What we found was that it was speed. For drone, we were able to auto scale our services, and we said that we would do that from day one. So in order to be able to see what this looked like, we took and did a test from the time that the user makes their commit until the time that the first step in the pipeline actually executes. And we recorded timestamps for each of those. For Travis, you were going to be waiting roughly a minute before your job would start. Probably important to note that these were done back in May of 2019, so I don't know if they've adjusted things since then. But Circle was even twice the weight of drone. And I mean, if you're a developer and you're sitting there trying to make your code work and you've been given this pipeline that you're supposed to run, it'd be nice if it was actually running while you were clicking around and trying to figure out what was happening. And drone, most of the time, by the time they got to the console, it was either already built or was well in the process of building their toolkit. We had about 7 seconds on average for the start of any repository, and that was all handled through the Autoscaler. It's a drone plugin. So if you go to autoscaler.drone.io, you'd be able to find out more information about it and how to use it. But just to give you an idea or a snapshot of what we're looking at, this is a typical increase for us where we'll get assigned, I believe in this particular case, it was 84 jobs that we needed to run. Those came into the queue. Very short order against each other. You can see the green line shows the pending jobs as they rolled into the system. Some of them get assigned right away. Others had to have more agents created. But the blue line shows us creating agents that are underneath the scenes here. We created 54 agents, which processed all 84 of those jobs in under 3 minutes. That's pretty neat, right? But how does this look over time? And just to give you an average week, this is the last 7 days. I actually took the snapshot this morning, and you can see we're scaling up and scaling down all over the place to be able to service the needs of the repository builds during those time frames. So with that, I'm going to hand back over to Jim, who's going to cover the Butler.
All right. So let's talk about the juggernaut of CI/CD systems, Jenkins. So over the years, we've replaced about 6 separate Jenkins with drone. And I'm going to talk about the most recent and most challenging Jenkins that we replaced. So in this particular Jenkins that I'm going to talk about, we were using for 2 things. One was for running Terraform, applying Terraform configuration in multiple AWS accounts with a Jenkins agent running in that account. And then we would also use it for deploying to 4 Marathon clusters. It's another container orchestration solution similar to Kubernetes that kind of predates Kubernetes that we were using in data centers and in AWS. So we ran a Jenkins agent in each data center and each AWS VPC. So quickly, Jenkins is a very mature project. It's been around for over a decade. Why would we want to move away from it? So in our experience, bringing up the new Jenkins agents was a very time-consuming process. So we would provide AWS accounts and consolidated billing to teams. They would manage their infrastructure in their accounts. We wouldn't have the ability to go into their accounts and bring up infrastructure and launch instances. So we would have to work with those teams to make that happen. We did our best to make modules, Terraform modules and example config, and to make that as easy as possible, but it was still too painful of a process to go through. When teams would want to make changes to their pipelines, their workflows, we were using the Jenkins DSL plugin, which helped a lot, but any deviation from what our C jobs were providing was almost impossible or very difficult for teams that needed to do custom steps in their pipelines. We would experience regular connectivity problems between the agents and our Jenkins server. The server, the plugins hadn't been updated in so long, in years. We know updating would have been a significant investment. And yeah, it was very difficult having teams with the agents in separate accounts and us having the server trying to maintain an upgrade cycle that was maintainable. So the first thing we used this Jenkins for was Terraform again. So we figured out a way to take the instance role of the drone agents we were running in our VPC. This is all AWS specific. And then combine that with an external ID, which is kind of like a password in IAM, to allow teams to safely authenticate from our agents and do actions in AWS to apply their infrastructure changes. So I'd love to talk about that more, but luckily I was able to do a talk earlier this summer on this, get really deep into this topic. If you're interested, you can find it at that link, Automate Your Infrastructure with GitOps, Terraform, and Drone. So now we covered Terraform. Now let's talk a bit about Marathon. So we had a monolithic Git repository where different steps had to run on different agents. And then pipelines would actually have to run on different agents depending on the files that got changed. So depending on if you make a change in one directory, it would have to apply, it would have to do some deployment in one data center versus another, or maybe in AWS. So the monolithic repository structure that was here was expected by teams, and they had really gotten into a workflow that worked well in Jenkins that we needed to replicate in Drone. So Jenkins is really good at build path sensitivity and build agent selection. So I want this job, I want this pipeline to run when this area of files are changed, and then I want that job to run on a certain agent that I have connected to my server. So Jenkins does those 2 things really well. The first, really there was no solution in Drone. The second, luckily, was already part of Drone, and so I'll show those now. So where I said the first wasn't really an option in Drone at the time, Drone does support conversion extensions. So we were able to leverage this to write our own conversion extensions. So conversion extensions are used to modify a Drone YAML before it's parsed and processed by the Drone server. So this is really powerful. It allows you to do any manipulation to your YAML pipeline based on whatever you decide before it gets passed back to your Drone server process. So like I said, we wrote our own. There were some good example code out there that drone provided. So we wrote our own drone convert paths changed conversion extension. This is open source. It's up in the Meltwater GitHub space, and it allows you to include or exclude pipelines or pipeline steps based on the paths changed in your commit range. So this was great. We worked on it, and it filled our use case, but it didn't take long for other teams to come to us and say, hey, I have a use case where I need to make certain steps run when certain files change. And it was great. We already had that solution at that point, so we were able to just hand that off to them with really no effort. So these days, there's about 20 Meltwater repositories that are using this capability. So if you've never seen a drone YAML before, this is an idea of what it can look like. This actually has two separate pipelines in the same drone YAML. The first will run on a specific node with the label of data center A. It will trigger when paths or when changes are made beneath the data center A directory in the repo. Yeah, and then the other below pipeline will run on the node of data center B, and when files are changed beneath the data center B directory. So we have a little recording that kind of shows how this all comes together, and maybe will help show what the workflow can look like in drone if you've never seen it before. So here we have an example repo where we've got a structure of data center and a directory called A. So we're going to make a change to a YAML file beneath there and see what happens. So the commit happened. Here's drone pipeline kicked off, and you can see the pipeline that ran is data center /A. And then we'll go back and do the same in the B directory. So we'll go into that YAML, make a change in there. You can't forget the commit message.
It's probably important to note in here that it's actually using two separate agents as well as building in two separate different locations.
Yep, two agents, different sides of the globe in this scenario for us. So here you can see the data center B pipeline ran. So totally different pipeline running on a totally different agent, and all that was managed in my drone YAML. I didn't have to go and change some Jenkins C job config. I could specify all that in my own repo. So at this point, I'll hand off to Brian.
Nice job, Jim. So Jenkins and Travis and Circle really weren't the only ones that took a hit. There were a lot of other ones that rolled off our CI solution list as we rolled out drone. One of these was Jenkins X. It was probably one of the first people that signed up to try drone. The file format from the Jenkins file to the drone YAML wasn't that much of a hit in terms of modifying, so those teams went really, really quickly. They were some of our first to move. After that, we had a temporary solution that we had put in place using code build and code pipeline to do some Terraform work, but that wound up being a very complex and not very scalable option. Code pipeline also requires you to use code pipeline, code build, CloudWatch, API gateway, Lambda, and a whole bunch of other services that you have to pay for, not just the one. So the last one that we had come in was Go CD. And I bring this up purely because a lot of these moving parts that ended up happening and these systems that ended up happening, this is what we would walk into. We'd come in the next morning and find a message in our inbox that says, hey, just thought we'd let you know we switched everything over to drone. Now, in this particular case, there were 100 repositories that moved over, or more than 100 builds that moved over. I shouldn't even say repositories. And They had about $4,000 worth of cost a month that were being saved through this whole deal, and they shifted their stuff over to us, and our scaling solution took over, and we didn't even know it happened apart from the message that we found in our inbox that morning. So part of this is building out a solution, but part of it is also trying to get a developer's attention. So this is how we got the developer attention. We built in different options and different solutions to the service to be able to help us essentially sell to our internal developers. The Docker registry plugin was a huge win because it took the nasty part of Docker logins, and if you've ever worked with ECR before, you have to log in every 12 hours or hour. I can't remember. I know it expires, but we have it set so that it checks every hour and makes sure that the login is still valid and the tokens have all changed, and that works really well. We also created a shared images repository. It's our Docker graveyard, if you will. Allows our engineers to be able to sit there and take binary packages and pull them together into a Docker image, maybe with a couple of other library sets, and they have a versioned Docker image that they can turn around and use in the pipeline. We also host in there a couple of private plugins that have been made available to our engineering staff for use with Opsgenie and other toolkits that we use for notifications and alerting, etc. And then there's the drone cache plugin. The drone cache plugin, much like the convert paths changed plugin, is a publicly open sourced plugin. You guys can try that if you want. It allows for them to be able to, or allows for the developers to be able to go through and cache expensive stuff like NPM installs. You can cache those NPM installs in your pipeline so that you don't have to do it every time you're doing a build. It just restores it from S3 and pulls it back into your pipeline. The other part that was super successful that I don't want to miss is the drone CLI. This is not your average CLI. This CLI allows you to interact with everything that you have on the web page, including being able to pull logs, script with it, have a ball. It has a flexible reporting language so that you can pull out custom fields. It interacts with just about everything in the API, and it also gives you a local executable environment. And that allowed all of our developers to be able to test out the triggers and the conditional statements and the decision trees that they had in Drone, and allowed them to test their pipelines before actually deploying them. Apart from this, we've done some automation work to be able to do things like manage our users more closely, configure secrets as code so that we're enabling repositories under robot users and not actual physical humans. That way, when people come and go from the company, we're not stuck with broken repositories or broken build processes. We do monitoring of failures so that we can go back through and look at the libraries and execution routines and see where the failures happened. And then we also, this past year, turned on the ability to go through and do third-party reporting, third-party availability reporting. We know when GitHub's having problems, usually long before they do. So that's some of what we've gone through and done in automation and getting our developers' attention for using Drone. And I'm going to turn it now back to Jim for some of the lessons we've learned.
Thanks, Brian. So we know at this point, after running this as a service for 2 years, that what works really well for us is when we don't try to force a tool set onto our engineers. If it's the right one, developers, they'll move on their own. winning combination of what drone gives you is the combination of custom Docker images and flexible YAML configuration. So you're putting the tools in the hands of the developers and removing the bottlenecks that used to be there, where they had to work with other teams that were managing what plugins were installed on Jenkins servers and what was available on Jenkins agents for them to use as libraries, and build steps and all these different things are now shifted into their drone YAML that they're managing in their repositories. So for us, running it as a service, we really we know that we need an unopinionated solution. The flexibility to customize and add to any solution that we provide is really essential. So the path change plugin to being able to write a conversion extension was really crucial to this being successful for us. We're getting towards the end. So if anyone is interested in keeping an eye on what Meltwater Engineering is doing, we have an official blog at underthehood.meltwater.com. And you can find both me and Brian, GitHub, Twitter. And we thank you very much for listening to our talk.